Hey there. Welcome to our channel Sleeping Pill, where stories drift softly into the night. I'm Michael, your companion on this slow journey into sleep. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let this gentle story carry you toward sleep. Tonight we're diving into one of those stories that unfolds so quietly you might miss it if you weren't paying attention. Picture this. You're in Lisbon, jet-lagged beyond belief, wandering through narrow cobblestone streets where the light hits the buildings at exactly the angle that makes you feel like you've stepped into someone else's dream. You probably won't survive the emotional whiplash of finding something that was never meant for you and deciding it's worth changing everything to deliver it anyway. You've come to Lisbon alone. Not dramatically alone, not running from anything or trying to find yourself in the way people always talk about. Just alone in the way that happens sometimes when you need a week away from the people who know you best. Your job has been suffocating you lately. Your apartment in your home city feels too small. So you booked a flight on a Tuesday without telling anyone, and now here you are on a Wednesday evening, standing in the kitchen of a rental apartment that smells like someone else's cleaning products and coffee, with jet lag making everything feel slightly surreal. The apartment is small but charming, the kind of place that was probably decorated by someone who'd read one too many design blogs but meant well. White walls, plants in mismatched pots, a print of Pessoa's face on one wall like he's watching you. The windows look out onto a street where people are already setting up for dinner service at the restaurants below, and the sound of Portuguese conversation drifts up, wrapping around you like a language you almost understand. You're standing in the kitchen trying to figure out where the coffee mugs are when you notice the mailbox. It's mounted on the wall beside the refrigerator, a small brass thing that looks like it's been there for decades, possibly since before you were born. There's a key in it which seems foolish from a security standpoint, but very European, very nobody locks anything here. You pull the key out thinking maybe you should check it just in case something important arrived, something that needs attention, something that can't wait. The mailbox is small enough to fit in your palm. You open it, expecting maybe some advertisements in Portuguese or bills, or those pamphlets about local restaurants that accumulate in vacation rentals. Instead, there's a single envelope, handwritten, old. The kind of envelope that's been sitting in this mailbox for so long that the paper has yellowed slightly, like it's been aging quietly, patiently, waiting for someone to notice it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're watching from somewhere interesting, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're settling in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull the envelope out of the mailbox. Your first thought is that someone made a mistake, addressed it to the wrong apartment, and it's been sitting here accumulating dust for who knows how long. Your second thought is that you should probably just leave it alone. Some mail isn't meant for you. Some things exist in the world specifically because they're supposed to belong to other people. But you're jet-lagged and alone in a foreign country, and something about the envelope calls to you. Maybe it's the handwriting. Careful, deliberate, the kind of penmanship that suggests someone took their time, cared about how their words looked, not just what they said. Maybe it's the way the ink has faded just slightly at the edges, like the letter has been touched many times, held many times, reread many times. Maybe it's just that you're bored and lonely and looking for something, anything, to distract you from the fact that you're alone in a foreign country. You turn the envelope over. It's addressed to someone named Marco at this address in a handwriting that still looks careful, but also looks heartbroken. If handwriting can look heartbroken, you know it shouldn't, but handwriting can carry things. You can see emotion in the curve of a letter, in the pressure of the pen. This handwriting carries something heavy. There's no return address. There's no postage on the envelope. No stamp. No postal mark. It's just sitting in this mailbox, unstamped and undelivered, like it's been waiting for permission to arrive. You should leave it alone. You should put it back in the mailbox and pretend you never saw it. You should go downstairs and get dinner and let jet lag pull you under into sleep. But instead, you're holding the envelope up to the light, trying to see if there's any indication of when it was written, any hint of who Marco might be, any clue about whether this letter is recent or ancient or somewhere in between. The paper is thick, expensive. Someone cared about the medium. Someone chose a nice envelope specifically for this letter, specifically for these words. Someone prepared to send this to Marco and then, for reasons unknown, never did. You stand in the rental kitchen with this stranger's mail in your hand and you're already making a decision. You're already crossing a line. You're already becoming the kind of person who opens other people's letters. Later you'll wonder if this is where it all starts. Not dramatically, not with a lightning bolt or a sign from the universe. Just with jet lag and curiosity and a handwritten envelope in a mailbox that wasn't meant for you. You're sitting on the edge of the rental apartment's bed, which is uncomfortable in that specifically European way, where the mattress is somehow both too hard and too soft, and you're holding the envelope like it might bite you. The light from the window is starting to fade, that golden late afternoon light turning orange, and you're thinking about the 1,000 reasons you should not open this letter. It's not yours. It was never meant for you. Privacy exists for a reason. Curiosity killed the cat and all of that. But then again, the cat came back, didn't it? In the second version of the rhyme, the one nobody ever finishes, the cat came back the very next day. You slip your thumb under the envelope's flap. The paper is thick enough that it doesn't tear easily. Whoever sealed this did it carefully, deliberately. You imagine someone, a woman you think, based on the handwriting, though you know that's not necessarily true, sitting at a desk somewhere in Lisbon, holding this envelope, sealing it with purpose, addressing it to Marco, and then just not sending it, leaving it in the mailbox like it's a test or a confession or a prayer thrown into the universe with the assumption it would never reach its destination. The letter is several pages long. The handwriting is consistent throughout, careful, deliberate, heartbroken. You unfold it slowly, as if moving quickly might somehow make it worse, might somehow make you more of an intruder. The opening line stops you cold. Marco, I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to send this, but I need to write it down anyway. You're sitting in a rental apartment in a foreign city, holding a letter that was never supposed to reach its destination, reading words that were never meant for your eyes, and you're already emotionally invested. This is how it happens, not gradually, all at once. The letter is dated. It's not recent. The date is from 12 years ago, which means this envelope has been sitting in that mailbox for over a decade. Longer than some marriages. Longer than some friendships. A long time for words to wait to be read, for a message to sit in the dark, unopened and undelivered. You read the letter slowly, trying to respect the privacy of it even as you're violating that privacy. The writer, you still don't know her name, it's not signed at the top, is writing to Marco about love, about a specific love, a particular love, a love that apparently ended or never began or ended before it could begin. The words are careful but also raw. She writes about watching him at a cafe where they both used to go. She writes about the way he ordered his coffee. She writes about overhearing him talk to a friend about a woman he was seeing and how that woman wasn't her and how she realized it never would be her. It's the kind of letter people write but never send. It's the kind of confession that exists in the space between what you feel and what you're willing to admit. It's vulnerable and honest and completely raw, and you're reading it like you're a thief, like you've stolen something precious and irreplaceable. The letter goes on. She writes about why she never sent it, about deciding that Marco deserved to live his life without knowing about her feelings for him, without the awkwardness of rejection, without the burden of being wanted by someone he didn't want back. She writes about choosing silence as a kindness. She writes about putting the letter in the mailbox one night, intending to mail it, and then changing her mind and just leaving it there. Not sure why. Maybe hoping that someday someone would find it and deliver it, or maybe hoping that no one would. She writes about the cafe closing down, about losing the only place she could reliably see him, about how that felt like losing him all over again, even though she'd never actually had him in the first place. She writes about moving on or trying to, or learning to pretend she had. She writes about life continuing in that frustratingly ordinary way it does, where big emotional moments become smaller and smaller until they're just memories, just old feelings that don't hurt quite as much anymore. By the time you finish reading the letter, the light outside has gone completely orange, then pink, then that particular shade of blue-purple that happens right before darkness falls in Lisbon. You're sitting on this uncomfortable bed in a rental apartment holding a love letter from 12 years ago, and you're making a decision. A decision that will change your week in Lisbon, that'll change how you spend your carefully planned vacation time. That will change something about you that you won't fully understand until much later. You're going to find Marco. You're going to find this person who was loved so completely and silently. And you're going to deliver this letter that was never meant to be delivered. You're not entirely sure why. You could list reasons: curiosity, boredom, romantic notions of being a messenger of lost love. But the truth is simpler than that. You've read these words. They exist now in your head and your heart. They're no longer just sitting in a mailbox waiting. They're living inside you, demanding something of you, demanding that you see this through. You set the letter carefully on the bed beside you. Your phone is dying. You flew internationally without charging it properly, which is very on brand for jet lag decision making. You find the charger, plug it in, and by the time it's powered back on, night has fallen fully. Lisbon is lit up now, the streets below your window glowing with the soft lights of restaurants and bars and people out, doing the things people do on a Wednesday night in a beautiful city. You open Google Maps. You search for Marco in Lisbon. There are many Marcos in Lisbon. This is going to be harder than you thought. This is going to require more than just showing up with a 12-year-old love letter. This is going to require actual detective work, actual investigation, actual commitment to something you have no real business committing to. You should go to bed. You should let jet lag win. You should forget about the letter in the mailbox and the woman who loved Marco so quietly, she kept it completely secret. Instead, you're already making a list of cafes in the neighborhood, searching for the one she mentions by name in the letter. You almost missed it, buried in the middle of a paragraph about how she loved the way the morning light came through its windows. You're already planning your tomorrow. You're already, without quite realizing it, becoming someone who meddles, someone who interferes, someone who believes that lost letters deserve to be found. The jet lag is fading now, replaced by something else, something like purpose, something like a story that's calling to you from inside an envelope that wasn't meant to be opened. Morning comes to Lisbon the way it does everywhere. Gradually, then all at once, then suddenly it's bright, and you're awake whether you want to be or not. You've slept poorly, the kind of sleep that's more like your brain, taking short breaks from consciousness than actual rest. The letter is still on the bed beside you, folded carefully, no longer dangerous, because you've already opened it, already read it, already committed yourself to whatever comes next. You get dressed, you shower, you make coffee in the rental apartment's tiny kitchen, using the expensive coffee maker that probably cost more than your entire flight. You're functioning like a normal person, but you're not thinking about normal things. You're thinking about the cafe mentioned in the letter. You're thinking about a woman who loved someone so quietly that no one knew. You're thinking about Marco, who has no idea that 12 years ago, someone was watching the way he ordered his coffee. The cafe is called O Primero Rayo, the first ray. According to the letter, it's in the Alfama neighborhood near the castle. According to Google Maps, it still exists. It's been there for 30 years. According to a review you find from 2015, you don't know if it was operating 12 years ago when the letter was written, but the odds seem good. People don't usually write about cafes that don't exist. You head out into Lisbon with the letter in your bag and absolutely no plan beyond showing up at this cafe and hoping that something will make sense once you get there. This is not a strategy. This is not even a coherent thought process. This is just jet lag and curiosity and the kind of decision making that happens when you're alone in a foreign country and have nothing to lose. The streets of Alfama are narrow and steep and cobblestoned in that way that makes your feet hurt after about 5 minutes of walking. There are laundry lines strung between buildings like decorative bunting. There are cats sleeping on steps. There are the sounds of Portuguese life happening behind closed doors and open windows, cooking sounds, conversation sounds. Someone's television turned up too loud. You're walking uphill toward the castle, following Google Maps' increasingly confident assurances that you're going the right direction, and you're realizing that you have absolutely no idea what you're looking for. Primeiro Raio, when you finally find it, is exactly the kind of cafe that would appeal to someone writing a love letter. It's small and slightly worn in a charming way. The chairs are mismatched. The tables are old wood, scarred with years of coffee cups and conversations. There's a counter where an older man is making espresso with the kind of focus that suggests that he's been doing this for decades. The light coming through the windows is exactly the kind of light the letter writer mentioned. Golden, soft, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's part of a painting. You sit at a table by the window. You order a coffee in English because your Portuguese extends roughly to hello and thank you and little else. The man doesn't seem to mind. He brings you a small espresso in a cup that's seen better days, and you sit there holding the warm cup, feeling incredibly foolish. What were you planning to do? Ask if anyone knows Marco? Show them the letter? Announce that you've become an accidental messenger of lost love? A woman sits down at the table next to you. She's older, maybe in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and the kind of face that suggests she's lived in Lisbon her entire life. She orders a coffee in Portuguese. She doesn't notice you at first, but then she does, the way people notice when they're being observed. She looks at you directly. "You're not from here," she says in English, not a question. "That obvious?" you ask. You have the look of someone trying to solve a puzzle with pieces from different boxes, she says. She smiles, not unkindly. "I'm Rosa. I come here most mornings. I wouldn't know if I'd seen you before." You're not sure why you do this, but you pull the letter out of your bag. You show it to her. You tell her the story. Jet lag and the mailbox and the unopened envelope and the woman who loved Marco so quietly. You tell her like you're confessing something, like you're admitting to a crime. You tell her because something about Rosa suggests that she understands about quiet loves and undelivered letters. Rosa reads the letter slowly. She doesn't say anything while she's reading. When she's finished, she folds it carefully and hands it back to you. She's quiet for a long time. "I know Marco," she says finally. "Or I did. He used to come here years ago. He would sit where you're sitting and he would read the newspaper and he would order the same coffee every day. He was a quiet man, the kind of man that women probably fell in love with without him knowing it. Your heart is doing something complicated in your chest. This is real. This person existed. This person was real enough to sit in this cafe and order coffee and have that coffee ordered in such a specific way that someone noticed. Do you know where he is now? You ask. He stopped coming maybe 10, 12 years ago, Rosa says. I remember thinking he must have moved or changed his routine or found a different cafe. He just disappeared from the morning rotation. He was here, and then he wasn't. Would you know how to find him? You ask. If I needed to find him? Rosa looks at you carefully, like she's trying to figure out if you're trustworthy, if you're the kind of person who should be trusted with this kind of information. You sit very still and try to look as harmless as possible which is hard when you're a stranger, holding a 12-year-old love letter and asking an old woman to help you track down a man you've never met. Why? Rosa asks. What do you want with Marco? I want to give him this, you say, holding up the letter. I want to give him something that was meant for him. I want to tell him that someone loved him so much that they couldn't even tell him themselves. I think he should know. Rosa is quiet. She drinks her coffee slowly. You can see her thinking, considering, weighing something in her head. Finally, she sets down her cup. There's a bookshop, she says, near the river. It's been there forever. Marco used to manage it. I don't know if he still does, but it's worth checking. It's called Livraria do Tempo, the Library of Time. It's exactly the kind of place he would end up. You thank her. You thank her profusely, like she's just handed you the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. You write down the bookshop's name carefully in your phone's notes app, even though you know you won't forget it. You finish your coffee. You sit in this cafe where Marco used to sit, in this light that the letter writer loved, and you feel like you're standing at the edge of something you don't fully understand. Livraria do Tempo is exactly the kind of bookshop you imagined it would be before you even knew it existed. It's squeezed between a fabric store and a restaurant that smells like grilled fish and garlic. The storefront is narrow and slightly crooked, in that way that old buildings in old cities are, like they're settling slowly into the earth and have accepted their fate. The window display is crammed with books, old books, new books, books that look like they've been handled so many times the spines have cracked and faded. There's a handwritten sign taped to the glass. Livraria do Tempo, where books find their readers. You push open the door. A bell chimes, an actual physical bell, not an electronic buzz, but a real bell that rings out into the quiet bookshop. The interior is dim and narrow, with shelves lining every wall and stacks of books on the floor, creating a kind of maze that you have to navigate carefully. The air smells like old paper and leather and dust and something else, something like time itself, which probably isn't a real smell but feels like it should be. There's a counter toward the back. Behind it sits a man who is reading a book with such focus that he doesn't immediately notice you've entered. He's older, maybe mid-60s, maybe older. It's hard to tell. He has gray hair and glasses and the kind of face that suggests he spent a lot of time thinking about things that don't have easy answers. You stand in the middle of the bookshop, holding the letter, feeling like you're about to do something monumentally foolish, and you're thinking about turning around and leaving and forgetting you ever found this place. But then the man looks up. He takes off his glasses. He closes his book carefully, marking his place with a bookmark that looks handmade. He sees you standing in his bookshop, like you're lost, like you're looking for something, like you might be a ghost or a memory or a question that's finally learned how to walk. Can I help you find something? He asks in English. He has an accent, Portuguese, but his English is careful and precise, the English of someone who learned it from books. This is the moment where you can still turn back. This is the moment where you can make up an excuse about looking for a book, browse for a few minutes, leave, and pretend this never happened. This is your last chance to be someone who finds a letter and returns it to the mailbox. and minds their own business. Instead, you walk toward the counter. You pull out the letter. You say, "Are you Marco?" The man goes very still. It's like you've asked him a question that requires him to stop everything else and think about whether he still answers to that name, whether he's still Marco or if he's become someone else in the years since anyone last called him that. "I am," he says finally. "Or I was. Or I am. But not in the way I used to be." He pauses. "Why are you asking?" "I found this," you say, holding out the letter. "It was in the mailbox of the apartment I'm renting. It's addressed to you. It was never delivered. It's been sitting in that mailbox for 12 years. Marco takes the letter from you like it might burn him, like it might break if he's not careful. He looks at the envelope like he's trying to recognize the handwriting the way you might recognize a face. His hands are shaking slightly. "I don't think you should open it yet," you say quickly. "I mean, you should. Obviously, it's addressed to you. But maybe not right now. Not with me standing here. It's very personal. It's a love letter. It's someone telling you something they never told you in person." Marco is still looking at the envelope. He hasn't opened it. He's just holding it, turning it over in his hands like it's the most fragile thing he's ever touched. "How did you find me?" he asks. "There's a woman named Rosa. She comes to a cafe in Alfama. She remembered you. She told me about the bookshop." "Rosa," he says quietly. "I haven't thought about Rosa in years. I haven't thought about that cafe in years." He looks at you directly. "Who is the letter from?" "She doesn't sign her name," you say. "But she writes about watching you order coffee. She writes about the cafe. She writes about falling in love with you without you knowing it. She writes about deciding that you deserve to live your life without that knowledge. She writes about putting this letter in your mailbox and changing her mind about sending it and just leaving it there. She writes about moving on." Marco sits down. He's still holding the letter. You can see something happening in his face, something like recognition or memory, or the past suddenly becoming present again, something like understanding. "There was a woman," he says slowly, "at the cafe. I remember her. She would sit by the window. She would always order a coffee and read. She never talked to me. I never talked to her. But I remember her. I remember thinking that she looked like someone who was waiting for something or someone. I remember thinking that I would have liked to know her better." He looks up at you. "What does she say? In the letter? What does she say about me?" "She says she loved you," you say gently. "She says that you ordered your coffee the same way every day, and she loved that about you. She says that you were kind to the cafe workers. She says that there was something about you that made her feel less alone just by being in the same room as you. She doesn't say what happens to her, but she says that she's moving on. She says goodbye in a way, without ever having said hello." Marco is holding the letter like it's made of something precious and breakable. He's looking at it like it's a key to something, like it's going to unlock something in him that's been locked for a very long time. You're standing in this bookshop in Lisbon, watching a man confront a love that he never knew existed, and you're wondering if you've done the right thing. You're wondering if delivering this letter is a kindness or if it's something else entirely. "I don't know your name," Marco says suddenly. "I'm you," you say. I'm not you, but I'm someone who was traveling alone and found this letter and decided that it was worth delivering. I'm someone who believed that words this honest deserve to be heard. Marco nods slowly. He tucks the letter carefully into his shirt pocket, close to his heart, literally and figuratively. He gestures to the bookshop around you, to the books and the shelves and the dust and the quiet. "This is what I did instead," he says, after she stopped coming to the cafe, after I realized that I'd been watching someone watch me, and neither of us had the courage to say anything. I opened this bookshop. I surrounded myself with stories. Because my own story wasn't working out the way I'd hoped, I created a space where lost people could find books, where lonely people could feel less alone. He pauses. "I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing." "I think it's both," you say. "I think most good things are." Marco closes the bookshop early. He flips the sign on the door from open to closed for the afternoon with the kind of decisiveness that suggests he doesn't do this often, that closing the bookshop in the middle of the day is an unusual thing, a significant thing. He pockets the keys. He looks at you and says, "Walk with me." You walk through Lisbon together, you and this man who has just received a letter that changes everything and nothing simultaneously. The city is beautiful in that particular way that old European cities are, layered with history, crowded with stories, every corner holding something that happened years ago, or centuries ago, or maybe just yesterday. You walk past the castle, you walk past churches, you walk down streets that are steep enough to make your thighs burn. Marco walks like he's walked these streets 1,000 times, like he knows them in his bones. "I loved her too," he says eventually. You haven't asked him anything, but he's answering a question that's been hanging in the air between you. "I didn't know her name. I never learned her name, but I loved her. I loved watching her read. I loved the way she would turn the page carefully, like she didn't want to disturb the words. I loved the way she would look out the window sometimes, like she was thinking about something very far away. I loved her, and I did nothing about it. And that's the coward's way out, isn't it? Not saying anything, not trying, not risking rejection." "Did you ever think about approaching her?" you ask. "Every single day," Marco says, "I rehearsed conversations in my head. I imagined 100 different ways to introduce myself. I imagined her smiling at me or not smiling or laughing or rolling her eyes and going back to her book. I imagined every possible outcome, and none of them seemed worth the risk of ruining the thing I had, which was just watching her, being near her, knowing she was in the world." He stops walking. You're at a viewpoint that looks out over the entire city, the river glinting in the afternoon light, the buildings cascading down the hills, the enormity of Lisbon spread out in front of you like a complicated answer to a simple question. "So I did nothing. And then one day she wasn't there anymore. I went to the cafe for months after that, hoping she would come back. She never did." "She moved," you say. "According to the letter. She says she had to move away. She says losing the cafe was like losing you all over again, even though she'd never actually had you." Marco nods slowly. He's holding the letter in his pocket like it's a thing that might disappear if he's not careful, like it might turn out to be a dream, a hallucination, a trick of the light. "What's your name?" he asks suddenly. I realize I never asked. I've been telling you my story, and I don't even know who you are. You tell him. He repeats it back to you like he's committing it to memory, like he wants to remember the person who delivered this impossible gift. Can I ask you something? Marco says. Why did you do this? You could have left the letter in the mailbox. You could have ignored it. You could have thrown it away. Why did you decide that my life was worth disrupting? You think about this carefully. You're not entirely sure the answer yourself. Because the letter existed, you say finally, and because words this honest deserve to be heard, and because I don't think any of us should have to spend our whole lives wondering if someone loved us. I think we should know, even if it's 12 years later, even if it's too late to do anything about it. I think the knowing matters. Marco is quiet for a long time. You stand together at this viewpoint, looking out over Lisbon, and the silence between you feels full rather than empty, like it contains something. I'm going to read it, Marco says, but not here, not now. I need to be somewhere private. I need to be ready for whatever she says. Will you come with me just to the bookshop? I don't want to be alone, but I also don't want to read it in front of you. I just want someone nearby, someone who understands what's happening. You nod. You walk back to the bookshop together. The streets of Lisbon have changed in some indefinable way, or maybe you've changed. Maybe delivering someone else's love letter has shifted something in how you move through the world. Inside the bookshop, Marco disappears into a back room. You sit in the front, surrounded by books, by stories, by the accumulated wisdom and foolishness of hundreds of authors. You pick up a book at random. It's poetry in Portuguese. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm of them is soothing. You read them anyway, sounding out the syllables, pretending you understand something that's completely foreign to you. You don't know how long Marco is in the back room. It could be 10 minutes or an hour or a lifetime. Time feels strange in a bookshop. Time feels like it works differently here, slower or faster or sideways. When Marco finally emerges, his eyes are red. He's been crying. He's holding the letter like it's the most important thing he's ever possessed. She says she's sorry, he says. His voice is rough. She says she was a coward. She says that she loved me for 2 years, while we existed in the same space without ever speaking. And then one day she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't keep loving someone in secret. And she moved to another city and tried to build a new life. She says she's sorry for not being brave. She says she's sorry for leaving without saying goodbye. She says that she doesn't expect anything from me now. She just wanted me to know that she loved me, that I was loved, even though I never knew it. He sits down. He's holding the letter carefully, like it might fall apart if he's not gentle with it. And then at the end, he says, she writes about finding peace. She writes about moving on. She writes about understanding that love doesn't have to be reciprocated to be real. She writes about hoping that I found someone who could love me the way I deserve to be loved. She writes about accepting that some loves exist in parallel universes, that they exist in the space between what we feel and what we say, and that maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough. He looks at you with tears streaming down his face and he says, she was right. It is enough. It has to be enough because it's all we have. It's all any of us have. The feeling, the knowing, the words on a page that have waited 12 years to be read. Marco keeps the letter. He doesn't tell you what he's going to do with it, but you understand that it's his now, that it belongs to him in a way it never belonged to anyone else. He tucks it back into his pocket, close to his heart, where it will stay. You sit in the bookshop for the rest of the afternoon. Marco makes tea in a small electric kettle that he keeps in the back room. You drink it from mismatched cups. One has a painting of the Tagus River. The other has a quote in Portuguese that you can't read. The bookshop is quiet around you. No customers come in. The world outside continues on without you, and inside this narrow shop filled with books, time moves differently. Marco tells you about the woman, not her name. He realizes he never learned her name, just like she never learned his, beyond the first name she heard called out at the cafe. But he tells you about the things he remembers. The way she always sat in the same spot. The way she read with complete absorption, like the rest of the world didn't exist. The way she looked sad sometimes, but the kind of sad that's beautiful, the kind of sad that suggests you're feeling something deeply instead of just going through the motions. He tells you that he opened the bookshop, partially because of her, because after she disappeared from the cafe, he needed a space where he could surround himself with people's interior worlds, with stories that people told on the page but not in person. I think I was trying to find her, he says. Not literally, but I was trying to find other people like her. Quiet people. People who lived in their heads. People who loved deeply but didn't make a show of it. I wanted to create a space where those people could feel at home. Did it work, you ask? Sometimes, he says. I've met beautiful people in this bookshop. I've heard their stories. I've helped them find the books that changed their lives. But I never found her again. I never knew if she was still in Lisbon or if she'd moved far away. I never knew if she thought about me the way I thought about her. She did, you say. According to the letter, she thought about you for a long time. She thought about what might have happened if one of you had been brave enough to speak. And now? Marco asks. What does she think now? I don't know, you say. The letter is 12 years old. She might have moved on completely. She might have built a whole life that doesn't include thinking about a man she watched at a cafe. She might be happy. She might be unhappy for completely different reasons. The letter is just a snapshot of a moment, of a feeling. It's not the whole story. Marco nods. He seems to accept this. He seems to understand that the letter, while beautiful and precious, is also incomplete. It's one side of a conversation that never happened. It's words that were never meant to reach their destination, delivered 12 years too late. I want to find her, Marco says suddenly. I know that's probably foolish. I know that 12 years have passed and we're both different people now, but I want to at least try. I want to send her a letter back. I want her to know that I received her words and that they mattered and that I was loved too, even if I didn't know it at the time. How would you find her, you ask? I don't know, Marco admits. The letter has no return address. There's no postage, so no postmark to trace. There's just the knowledge that she was in Lisbon 12 years ago, and that she loved me in silence. There's just that cafe and that moment, and the fact that Rosa might remember more than she told you. You think about Rosa sitting in that cafe this morning, sipping her coffee, watching the light come through the windows. You think about how she recognized Marco's story immediately, how she remembered the quiet man who came every day and then disappeared one day. You think about how stories are woven through cities, how people carry them in their heads and hearts, how sometimes a stranger can help you find the pieces of your own narrative. We could go back to the cafe, you say. We could ask Rosa if she remembers anything else. We could show her the letter. We could ask if she knows who the woman might be, if she has any ideas about where she went. Marco looks at you like you've just offered him something precious, like you've offered him the possibility of a second chance, even though second chances with the same person after 12 years aren't usually second chances. They're usually just different versions of the same story, played out with age and experience and time doing their work on both parties. You walk to the cafe together as the sun is starting to set. Lisbon glows orange and pink and gold. The streets are crowded with people heading home from work or heading out for dinner or just walking through the city the way people do when they're part of a place and have nowhere else to be. Marco moves through the crowd like he knows it, like he's made peace with Lisbon. Even though Lisbon gave him heartbreak and loneliness and 12 years of wondering. Rosa is still at the cafe. She's in a different seat now, but it's still by the window. She's still reading.
I could go to the translation agency, Marco says. I could ask if they have any way to contact her. I could ask if they could pass along a message. I could figure this out as I go. You realize that Marco is already decided. You realize that he's already packed this decision away and committed to it. What he needs from you now isn't advice or caution or reasonableness. What he needs is permission. What he needs is someone to witness this moment and say, yes, this is brave. This is worth doing. This is the kind of thing people should do. Then we should go tomorrow, you say. Porto is only 3 hours away by train. We could leave in the morning. We could be there by afternoon. We could figure it out. We? Marco says. You would come with me? Of course I would, you say. I started this story. I'm not leaving now. So you go to Porto. You take the train in the morning, sitting in a compartment with Marco, watching in the Portuguese countryside slide past the windows, green hills and small towns and the kind of landscape that feels ancient and patient. Marco is nervous. You can see it in the way he's holding the letter, taking it out and putting it back, reading passages to himself, and then stopping and looking out the window. What if she doesn't want to see me? He asks at one point. What if she's moved on completely? What if she has a husband or a partner or a life that doesn't have room for a man from her past? Then you'll know, you say. And you can go back to Lisbon and you can tell yourself that you tried, that you were brave, that you gave her the gift of knowing that her love mattered, that it reached him, even if it took 12 years and a stranger with a found letter to make it happen. Porto is different from Lisbon. It's built on even steeper hills. The buildings are even older. There's a river, the Douro, and it's glittering in the afternoon light. The city feels like it's been layered on top of itself for centuries, like you're walking through different versions of time simultaneously. The translation agency is in a modern building near the river. It's nothing like you expected. You were imagining something dusty and filled with dictionaries, but instead it's sleek and contemporary with young people.
working at desks, and the sound of phone calls in multiple languages. A woman at the front desk looks up as you and Marco enter. "We're looking for Sophia Martins," you say. "We have a personal matter we need to discuss with her." The woman's face becomes polite but professional. "Sophia doesn't work in this office," she says. "She works remotely. She comes in occasionally for meetings, but not regularly. I can take a message for her, but I can't give out her contact information. Privacy policy." Your heart sinks. You've come all this way and you're going to hit a wall. You're going to leave Porto without finding her, without completing this story. But then Marco does something you don't expect. He takes out the letter. He shows it to the woman at the desk. He says, "This is from Sophia. It's a personal letter that never reached me. I've driven 3 hours to return it to her. Can you please tell her that Marco is here? Can you please ask if she'll see me?" The woman's entire demeanor changes. She looks at the letter. She looks at Marco's face. She seems to understand that this is not a normal request, that this is something that matters. "Wait here," she says. She disappears into the back. You and Marco stand in this modern office that suddenly become the center of your entire narrative, and you're holding your breath like you're both underwater, like you're both waiting to surface. The woman comes back. She has a phone number written on a piece of paper. "Sophia said," the woman says carefully, "that if someone named Marco ever came looking for her, I should give him her number. She said she wasn't sure he ever would, but if he did, I should tell him to call her. She said her number hasn't changed in 8 years. She said she's been waiting." Marco holds the piece of paper like it might disintegrate if he's not careful. A phone number, 8 digits. The possibility of hearing a voice he hasn't heard in 12 years. The possibility of a woman answering who has been waiting, who has wondered, who has maybe hoped without believing in the hope. You find a cafe near the river. You sit at a small table outside, watching the Douro flow past, and you watch Marco stare at the phone number like it's written in a language he doesn't understand. His hands are shaking slightly. He's pale. He looks like someone who's about to do something that will change everything, and he's not entirely sure he's ready. "You should call her," you say gently. "I know," Marco says. "I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say. How do you call someone after 12 years and say, 'Hello, I loved you too, I just didn't know it at the time'? How do you call someone and say, 'Your letter arrived, it only took a decade, but it arrived'? How do you bridge 12 years of silence with words? You just do it," you say. You pick up the phone and you dial and you say something true. The words will come because they have to. Marco pulls out his phone. He types in the number carefully, like he's afraid of making a mistake and reaching someone else entirely, someone who will answer confused about why a stranger is calling them from Porto with their heart in their throat. He takes a breath. He presses call. For a moment, nothing happens. Then you hear ringing, and then a voice. A woman's voice speaking Portuguese. Marco says something in Portuguese back. You don't understand the words, but you understand the tone. You understand that something in him has shifted, has recognized something, has come home to a voice he didn't know he was missing. He switches to English. "Sophia? It's Marco, from the cafe, from Lisbon." There's a long silence on the other end. You can't hear what she's saying, but you can see Marco's face. You can see him trying to stay composed while something is breaking open inside him. "I'm in Porto," he says. "I came to find you. Someone brought me a letter.
A letter that was meant for me. It's been sitting in my mailbox for 12 years. It's from you? And He stops. He's struggling. I needed you to know that I got it, that I read it, that everything you felt, I felt too. I just didn't have the courage to say it. More silence. You're sitting across from him, watching him have a conversation with someone 12 years in the past and someone brand new simultaneously. You're watching him bridge a gap that seemed unbridgeable. Can I see you? He asks. Can I come to you? I have the letter. I want to give it back to you. I want to tell you in person that you were loved, that you are loved, that I'm sorry it took so long. He's quiet, listening, and then his face changes. It softens. It becomes something like hope, but careful hope, cautious hope, hope that's been through enough to know that it can be broken. Okay, he says. Okay, I'll see you soon. He hangs up. He sets down the phone. He looks at you and he says, she wants to meet me. She's at her apartment. She says she's been waiting for me to call for so long that she's not even surprised anymore. She says she has her own letter. She wrote one after she moved to Porto. She's kept it all these years. She's been keeping it in case I ever found her. You feel tears starting, which is absurd because this isn't your story. This is their story. But you've been part of the bridge between them. You've been the person who connected them. And somehow that means something. It means you're part of this too. Marco gives you Sophia's address. You get in a taxi together. You drive through Porto, through streets that are narrow and steep and confusing. You drive past churches and shops and the lives of thousands of people who don't know that something significant is happening in a taxi moving through their city. You drive until the taxi stops in front of an old building with blue tiles on its front, and Marco says, "This is it. I'm going to wait down here," you say. "This is between you two. I've done my part." Marco looks at you like you're about to abandon him, and then he understands. He understands that you've brought him to this moment, and now he has to walk through the door alone. He has to climb the stairs. He has to knock on a door. He has to see Sophia's face for the first time in 12 years and figure out what a life looks like when the past suddenly becomes present again. He gets out of the taxi. He takes the letter from his pocket. He stands in front of the building like he's gathering courage from somewhere deep inside himself. And then he pushes open the door and disappears. You sit in the taxi. The driver doesn't speak English and you don't speak Portuguese, so you sit in silence together watching the street, watching people walk past, watching the city go about its business. Time moves differently when you're waiting for something. Time becomes elastic. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like minutes. You don't know how long Marco is gone. It could be 30 minutes or an hour or a lifetime. But eventually he emerges from the building. He's not alone. There's a woman with him, older, gray-haired, the kind of woman who looks like she's lived a full life and is still living it. She's looking at Marco like she's trying to commit him to memory, like she's trying to make sure this is real, that he's actually here, that he's not something she's imagined 12 years worth of times. They stop on the street for a moment. They just stand there together, this man and woman who loved each other from across a cafe table, who never spoke, who wrote letters that never arrived, who spent 12 years building separate lives in separate cities.
They stand together and it looks like they're just looking at each other, but it looks like everything is being said. Marco looks up at the taxi. He waves, he nods. He's saying goodbye, but not in a sad way. He's saying goodbye because he doesn't need you anymore. He's found what he was looking for. He's found the person who was waiting, and now he has work to do. Now he has years of words to sort through, a lifetime of what-ifs to either grieve or celebrate or somehow do both simultaneously. You tell the driver to take you back to the train station. You're done in Porto. Your part of the story is finished. You delivered the letter. You brought them together. You witnessed the moment when two people who loved each other in silence finally got to speak. The train back to Lisbon feels longer than the train to Porto, even though it's the same distance. You sit in a different compartment this time, alone, watching the Portuguese countryside move backward through the window. You're thinking about Marco and Sofia standing on that street in Porto, about the 12 years between them, about how sometimes the most important things are the ones that never get said until it's almost too late. Your phone buzzes. It's a message from Marco. Thank you. She read the letter. She cried. I cried. We're going to have dinner tonight. We're going to figure out what happens next. I don't know what that looks like yet, but at least now we get to find out together. Thank you for this. You reply, I'm glad. I'm really glad. Tell Sophia I'm sorry for being an accidental thief of her privacy. Marco's response comes quickly. She says she's grateful. She says that sometimes we need a stranger to do the brave thing so we can finally do it ourselves. She says she's writing you a letter. She says she wants to thank you properly. She's going to mail it to Rosa's cafe in Lisbon. She says Rosa will know how to get it to you. You smile at your phone. You're sitting on a train in Portugal, and someone you've never met is writing you a thank you letter. This is absurd. This is beautiful. This is the kind of thing that only happens in stories, and yet it's happening to you. By the time you get back to Lisbon, it's evening. The city is lit up, glowing with that particular kind of beauty that comes from old buildings and good light and 1,000 years of history layered on top of itself. You go back to the rental apartment, you stand in the kitchen and you look at the mailbox, at this small brass thing that changed everything, that was just sitting there waiting for you to arrive and decide to be curious. You take out your phone and you book an extra week in Lisbon. You cancel your original plans. You tell your job that you need more time. You decide that you're not ready to go home yet. You decide that you want to sit in O Primero Rayo and drink coffee in the light that Sofia loved. You decide that you want to see what happens next in this story, even if you're only a peripheral character now. The next morning you go back to the cafe. Rosa is there in her usual spot by the window. She looks at you and she smiles like she's been waiting for you, like she knew you would come back. Marco found her, Rosa says. Before you even sit down, it's not a question. He did, you say. How did you know? He called me this morning, Rosa says. He wanted me to know. He wanted me to understand that it all worked out, that the woman who used to sit by this window and love him quietly finally got to tell him. He wanted me to know that 12 years of waiting was worth it. You sit with Rosa. You drink coffee in the golden light. You talk about Marco and Sofia, about love that waits patiently, about how sometimes The universe takes a long time to deliver its messages, but they do arrive eventually. You talk about the letter, about how a simple piece of paper can change everything. She sent you something, Rosa says. She pulls an envelope from under the table. It's addressed to you in careful handwriting. Sophia's handwriting. She brought it by this morning. She wanted to make sure you got it. She said it was important. You open the envelope carefully. There's a letter inside, several pages, written in Sophia's careful hand. Dear stranger, it begins. I don't know your name, though Marco told me. But I will always think of you as the person who changed everything by choosing to deliver a letter that wasn't meant for you. By choosing to be brave when I was brave in silence. By choosing to believe that some things are worth disrupting for. She writes about what it was like to receive Marco's phone call. She writes about standing in her apartment shaking, realizing that he had gotten her letter, that he had understood, that he had come looking for her. She writes about opening the door and seeing his face and recognizing him immediately, even though 12 years had passed. She writes about the conversation they had, about the tears, about the realization that they had been loving each other the entire time, just not where the other person could see it. What I want you to know, she writes, is that your intervention wasn't interference. Your meddling wasn't intrusion. You gave us both a gift. You gave us the gift of knowing that we were loved. You gave us the gift of a second chance, or maybe a first chance, depending on how you look at it. You gave us the gift of being able to move forward knowing that love existed between us, even when it was unspoken. She writes about the future. She writes that Marco is considering moving to Porto, or that she's considering moving back to Lisbon, or that maybe they'll find somewhere new together. She writes that they have a lot to figure out, but that at least now they get to figure it out together. I hope you find what you are looking for in Lisbon, she writes. I hope this city gives you what it gave me, a place to sit quietly and think, to feel deeply, to love without always having to announce it. I hope that your week here changes you the way Marco and I have been changed by each other even when we didn't know we were changing. I hope you learn what I learned, that love doesn't have to be said to be real, but it helps when someone finally says it. She signs it. With gratitude, Sophia. You fold the letter carefully. You set it on the table in front of you. You're crying, which is ridiculous because this is a happy ending, or at least it's the middle of a happy story, and happy things shouldn't make you cry. But they do sometimes. Sometimes happiness is just as overwhelming as sadness. They're going to be okay, Rosa says. It's not a question. Rosa is making a statement of fact. Yeah, you say. I think they are. And what about you? Rosa asks. Are you going to be okay? Are you going to go home and forget about all of this? You think about it. You think about your life before you came to Lisbon. You think about how lonely you were, how small your world had become, how you were existing but not really living. You think about how a wrong mailbox and a curious impulse changed everything. I don't know, you say honestly. I think I'm going to stay for a while longer. I think I'm going to sit in this cafe and drink coffee in this light and figure out what I want my life to look like when I go back. I think I'm going to remember that sometimes the most important things are the ones that happen by accident. I think I'm going to remember that you can change someone's life just by paying attention, just by caring enough to deliver a letter. Rosa smiles. She signals the cafe worker to bring you another coffee. She settles back in her chair. She opens her book, and you sit together in the golden light, two strangers who have become something like friends, watching Lisbon move past the window, watching the ordinary city do its ordinary work of being beautiful and heartbreaking and worth paying attention to. Over the next week, you fall into a rhythm in Lisbon. You wake up in the rental apartment. You have coffee there, standing in the kitchen, looking out at the street below. You go to O Primero Rayo around mid-morning. You sit in the golden light. You drink coffee and read and watch the people moving through the cafe. Rosa is always there, or almost always there. You've started to understand that this is her life, that this cafe is where she exists, and you've started to understand why. There's something about this place that feels like home, like a space where it's okay to think quietly, to feel deeply, to just exist without having to perform or pretend or be anything other than what you are. You've started writing in a notebook. You're not sure why you started, but at some point you realized you were writing down conversations, descriptions, moments. You're writing down what it felt like to find that letter. You're writing down what Marco's face looked like when he realized he was loved. You're writing down the way the light comes through these cafe windows and how it makes everything look like it's part of a painting. You're writing down your own story. You realize the story of a person who came to Lisbon alone and found something she wasn't looking for. On the third day, Marco and Sophia come to the cafe together. They sit at a table near yours, though you pretend not to notice them at first. You're pretending to read, but really you're watching them from the corner of your eye. They're holding hands across the table. They're not talking much, just sitting together in the light, and that seems to be enough. After 12 years of distance, they're learning how to be present with each other. They're learning how to be quiet together without it being lonely. Sophia sees you watching. She smiles at you. She nudges Marco. Marco looks over and waves. They get up and come to your table. "We wanted to thank you properly," Sophia says. She sits down beside you. Marco sits beside her. "We wanted to look at you in person and thank you for what you did." "I didn't do much," you say. "I just opened a mailbox and decided to be nosy." "You did more than that," Marco says. "You believed that what was written mattered. You believed that we deserved to know. You were brave enough to be a messenger, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was risky." Sophia reaches across the table and squeezes your hand. "I spent 12 years wondering if Marco thought about me at all," she says. "I spent 12 years wondering if what I felt was one-sided, if I was alone in loving someone in silence. And now I know. Now I know that he was thinking about me too. Now I know that I wasn't alone, that I was never alone. That changes everything." "What are you going to do?" you ask them. "Are you staying in Porto? Are you moving? Are you figuring it out?" "We're taking our time," Marco says. "We're not rushing. We spent 12 years waiting. We can spend a few more months just existing together, just figuring out what we want." Sophia is thinking about transferring to a translation agency in Lisbon. I'm thinking about potentially opening a second bookshop in Porto.
We're thinking about a lot of things. We're thinking about seeing where this goes, Sophia says, without forcing it, without trying to make up for lost time all at once. We're thinking about just being together. Finally, they stay for a while longer. You talk about Lisbon, about Porto, about what it's like to live in a city you love. You talk about translation, about how Sophia chooses which books to bring into Portuguese, about how she thinks about the author's voice and tries to preserve it while making it sound natural in another language. You talk about books and cafes and the way that Lisbon seems to pull people toward it, seems to have a gravity of its own. When they leave, Marco hugs you. He says, "Thank you for being brave. Thank you for being the kind of person who sees something and decides to do something about it. Thank you for not just walking past the mailbox." After they leave, you sit with Rosa for a long time without talking. The cafe fills up with lunch customers. The golden light shifts as the sun moves across the sky. Lisbon continues its work of being beautiful and complicated and worth paying attention to. "You're going to write about this," Rosa says eventually. "It's not a question." "I don't know," you say. "Maybe. I don't know if it's my story to write. It's their story. It's everyone's story," Rosa says. "It's the story of Lisbon. It's the story of love that waits patiently. It's the story of a stranger who decided that connection mattered more than privacy. It's your story because you were part of it, because you lived it, because you made it happen." You think about that. You think about all the stories you've lived that you've never told. You think about how many moments pass that we never commemorate, never record, never tell anyone about. You think about how maybe the most important work is keeping track of the beautiful, ordinary things. Maybe the most important work is noticing. That night, you sit in the rental apartment and you write. You write about everything. You write about finding the letter. You write about Marco's face when he read it. You write about Porto and the translation agency and the woman at the desk who somehow already had Sophia's phone number ready. You write about Marco and Sophia standing on the street, just looking at each other. Years of silence, finally broken. You write about what it felt like to be part of their story, to be the bridge between them. You write until your hand hurts. You write until you've said everything you need to say. You write until the story feels complete, or at least until it feels like it's reached a natural resting place, a moment where it's okay to stop and let other people take over the narrative. When you're done, it's late. The city outside your window is quiet. You can hear the distant sounds of people still out, still living their nighttime lives, still doing the work of being human in a city that's been human for centuries. You look at what you've written, you read it over, and you realize that you've written something true, you've written something that matters, you've written something that'll let you remember this week for the rest of your life. The second week in Lisbon feels different from the first. You're not a tourist anymore. You're not a stranger stumbling through the city making accidental connections. You're someone with a routine. You're someone who has a table at a cafe. You're someone who knows the rhythm of a place, knows when it will be busy and when it will be quiet, knows which streets to take to avoid the crowds and which ones to take when you want to feel like part of something larger,
You've started teaching English at a language school near the Baisha neighborhood. It was accidental. You were having coffee at a different cafe, reading a newspaper you could barely understand, when a woman sat down next to you and asked if you spoke English. She turned out to be the owner of a language school. She asked if you wanted to teach a few classes while you were in Lisbon. You said yes before you'd fully thought about it. This is how your life has been working lately. You say yes to things and then figure out what to do about them. The students are a mix. Some are tourists trying to prepare for trips. Some are Portuguese people trying to improve their English for work. Some are just lonely and want an excuse to sit in a classroom and talk to someone. You teach them vocabulary and grammar, but mostly you teach them that it's okay to stumble through a language, that mistakes are part of the process, that the most important thing is trying. On Tuesday morning, a young woman comes to your class. She's Portuguese, probably early 20s, and she's quiet in a way that reminds you of Sophia. She sits in the back of the classroom. She doesn't raise her hand much. She listens carefully. When you ask her to introduce herself, she says her name is Marta and that she loves to read, but she wants to be able to read English books in the original language. Why English books specifically, you ask her? Because, she says carefully, choosing her words, the best writers are often writing about things that are too big for one language. They're writing about love and loss and the spaces between people. Those things need to be read in the author's own words. Translation is beautiful, but sometimes you want the original. You recognize something in her. You recognize the kind of person who feels things deeply. You recognize the kind of person who sits quietly and observes and wonders about things that most people walk past without noticing. After class, you ask her to stay for a moment. I have something I want to tell you, you say. And then you tell her about Marco and Sophia. You tell her about the letter in the mailbox. You tell her about how sometimes love exists in the spaces between people, in the things that are never said, in the quiet attention we pay to each other without the other person knowing. Marta listens carefully. When you're finished, she says, "Do you think they're happy now, Marco and Sophia?" "I think they're figuring out how to be happy," you say. "I think they're learning that happiness isn't something that happens all at once. I think they're learning that sometimes you have to rebuild trust in someone you've been in love with, even if the love was unspoken. I think they're doing the work of being human together." "That's good," Marta says. "That's really good." Over the next week, you tell more people the story. You tell it to your landlord when you extend your lease. You tell it to the barista at a different cafe. You tell it to a woman you meet on a train. You tell it to your language students. The story starts to take on a life of its own. The story starts to become something that people in Lisbon are telling each other. You get a call from Marco one afternoon. "Sophia and I are having dinner," he says. "We want you to come. We want to celebrate, I guess. We want to mark the moment. 1 month. We've been together for 1 month, and it feels like it's been forever and also like it just started." You go to dinner with them. They take you to a restaurant that overlooks the Tagus River. The light at sunset is turning everything pink and gold. You sit with Marco and Sophia, and you eat fish and drink wine, and you listen to them talk about their week, their plans, their thoughts about the future. "I'm moving back to Lisbon," Sophia says. I gave notice at my job in Porto. I'm going to start freelancing. I'm going to have more control over my time. I'm going to be able to build a life here instead of always feeling like I'm living in exile. And I'm expanding the bookshop, Marco says. I'm taking on an employee so I can take time off. I'm thinking about my life differently now. I'm thinking about what I want instead of just accepting what I have. You changed everything, Sophia says to you. You changed everything by deciding to be curious, by deciding that a sealed letter was worth opening, by deciding that we deserve to know. You changed everything by being brave, you say, by writing the letter in the first place, by saying the things that needed to be said, even if you weren't sure they'd ever reach him, by being willing to feel deeply even when it hurt. You sit together as the sun sets completely, as Lisbon lights up, as the city transforms from day into night. You sit with two people who loved each other in silence, and now they don't have to anymore. You sit with two people who are figuring out how to be together for the first time, even though they've known each other for years. Later that night, walking back to your apartment, you think about what comes next. You think about going home. You think about leaving Lisbon and returning to your regular life. You think about what you're going to do with the story you've lived, with the writing you've done, with the person you've become. In just 2 weeks, in a foreign city, you stop at the mailbox in your apartment building. The same mailbox where this all started. You open it, there's mail inside. Advertisements, a magazine. Ordinary things. Nothing magical. Nothing life-changing. Just the regular business of people sending things to other people, hoping they arrive, hoping they matter, hoping that someone on the other end is paying attention. You pick up the mail and you carry it upstairs, you set it on the table. You sit on the uncomfortable bed in the rental apartment and you think about time. You think about how quickly 2 weeks have passed. You think about how completely a life can change when you decide to pay attention to something. You think about Marco and Sophia. You think about Rosa. You think about Marta, who reminds you so much of Sophia that you wonder if maybe Lisbon is full of women like that. Quiet women who love deeply, who pay attention, who exist in the spaces between spoken and unspoken things. 3 weeks in, you've stopped thinking of yourself as a visitor. You've started thinking of yourself as someone who lives in Lisbon, at least temporarily. You've gotten an apartment, a real one, not a rental, a lease that goes month to month with a landlord who doesn't ask too many questions about your plans. It's small and it doesn't have much light, but it's yours. It's a place where you can leave your things out and not worry about someone else's cleaning schedule. It's a place where you can build a small life. You're still teaching English, but now you're teaching more classes. The language school likes you. They've asked if you want to commit to a longer contract. You're thinking about it. You're thinking about staying in Lisbon longer. You're thinking about what it might look like to build something here, to plant roots, to stop being someone who's just passing through. One afternoon, Marco comes to your class. He sits in the back and watches you teach. After class is over, you ask him why he's there. Sophia wanted me to see this, he says. She wanted me to understand what you do. She wanted me to see you in your element. She says that you have a gift for making people comfortable, for making them believe that their mistakes don't matter, that trying is enough. That's nice of her to say, you say. It's true, Marco says. You did that for me. You made me believe that it was worth trying to find Sophia, even though I had no idea if it would work. You made me believe that the effort mattered, regardless of the outcome. You sit together after the students have left. You're gathering up papers, organizing things, doing the small tasks that come at the end of the day. I want to show you something, Marco says. He pulls out a leather journal. It's worn, like it's been used a lot. This is Sophia's journal. She's given me permission to show you. She's given me permission to share this with you because you're part of our story. You open the journal carefully. The handwriting inside is Sophia's, careful, deliberate, thoughtful. You scan the entries and you realize these are from the years she spent in Porto. These are from the years after she moved away from Lisbon. These are from the years she spent loving Marco from a distance, wondering if he ever thought about her, trying to build a life without him. Read this one, Marco says. He points to an entry dated about 5 years into Sophia's time in Porto. I was in Lisbon today, the entry reads. I went back for a translation conference. I spent an hour just sitting in O Primeiro Raio, drinking coffee in the golden light, hoping that maybe he would walk in and I would see him and I could check that he was okay, that he was living well, that my absence from his life hadn't somehow diminished his existence. Of course he didn't come. Why would he? He doesn't know that I spent years loving him in that cafe. He doesn't know that I left partly because I couldn't bear to keep feeling something that would never be reciprocated. I left to protect myself, I think. I left because staying was breaking my heart every single day. But leaving broke my heart too, just in a different way. You read through more entries. You read Sophia's thoughts about love that's never spoken. You read her thoughts about loneliness and translation and how language is never enough, how words always fall short of what you're actually trying to say. You read her thoughts about Lisbon and missing it, about wondering if she should go back, about deciding that she couldn't, that it would be too painful to be in the same city as Marco without being part of his life. The thing I want you to understand, Marco says, is that this was real. What Sophia felt, what she carried all those years. It wasn't a fantasy or a passing crush. It was a real love that she lived with, that shaped her life, that made her decisions for her. And that was all happening in parallel to my own life. My own feelings, my own questions. We were both carrying the same love, just separately. I know, you say quietly. I understood that from the letter. But I wanted you to know that it continued, Marco says. I wanted you to understand that the letter wasn't just a moment. It was years of moments, accumulated, waiting to be acknowledged. You close the journal carefully. You hand it back to Marco. You feel something shift in you as you do. You feel like you're understanding for the first time what you actually did when you opened that mailbox. You didn't just deliver a letter. You connected two halves of a love that had been split across years, in cities, in silence. You didn't bridge a gap. You revealed that there had never been a gap at all. They'd been loving each other the entire time. They'd been connected the entire time. They just hadn't known it. That evening you write in your own notebook. You write about what Marco showed you. You write about Sophia's years in Porto, about how she was building a life, but also waiting, also hoping, also carrying something that she thought she would have to carry alone forever. You write about how sometimes we underestimate the capacity of the human heart to hold something, to wait with something, to love something, without ever knowing if that love will be returned. You write about the mailbox. You write about how a small brass thing mounted on a wall in a rental apartment changed everything. You write about how sometimes the most significant moments in our lives are also the smallest, the quietest, the most easily overlooked. You write about how you could have walked past that mailbox 100 times and never noticed. You could have ignored the letter, you could have thrown it away, but you didn't. And because you didn't, 2 people got to stop being lonely in silence. You write about Lisbon. You write about how this city does something to you, how it makes you pay attention, how it makes you believe that small things matter, that connections matter, that the quiet moments are the ones that actually change everything. You write about how you came here alone, and you've stayed here, and now you're not alone anymore. You've built connections. You've built a community. You've built a life that 2 weeks ago you couldn't have imagined. You write about the future. You write about what happens next for Marco and Sophia. You write about what happens next for you. You write about the uncertainty of it all, the not knowing, the willingness to just show up and see what happens. You write about how maybe that's what courage is, not knowing what's going to happen and doing it anyway. Not being sure that things will work out and trying anyway. Not believing that love is possible and opening yourself up to it anyway. When you're done writing, you're exhausted. But it's a good exhaustion. It's the exhaustion that comes from doing the work of paying attention, of noticing, of trying to put into words something that's mostly impossible to put into words. It's the exhaustion of someone who's lived something and is trying to capture it before it slips away. You set down your pen, you look out your window at Lisbon, the city is glowing with evening light, the city is alive with people doing the ordinary work of being human. The city is beautiful and heartbreaking and full of stories that no one will ever hear. The city is waiting. A month has passed since you found the letter. You're sitting at your usual table at O Primero Rayo. Rosa is across from you, also in her usual spot. The morning light is the same golden light it always is. The coffee tastes the same. But you are different. Everything is different. Even though everything also looks exactly the same. Marco and Sophia have announced that they're moving in together. They've found an apartment in the Príncipe Real neighborhood, not far from the bookshop, close to where Sophia will be setting up her freelance translation work. They're building a life together that combines both of their worlds. Marco is talking about opening a second bookshop in their apartment, a smaller version of the main one, a space where Sophia's translations can be displayed alongside the books she's worked on. It's a beautiful solution, his books and her words, existing together, informing each other. Marta, your student, has become a regular at the cafe too. She comes after her classes and sits and reads English novels and slowly improves her language skills. You've started lending her books from Marco's bookshop. You've started introducing her to Rosa. She's becoming part of the community that exists around this cafe, around this light, around this particular corner of Lisbon. You've been offered a permanent position at the language school. They want you to stay. They want you to build a curriculum. They want you to mentor other teachers. You've said yes, pending a few details. You're going to stay in Lisbon for at least another year, maybe longer. You don't know what comes after that, but you're learning to be okay with not knowing. Rosa reaches across the table and covers your hand with hers. You're going to stay, she says. It's not a question. I think so, you say. I think I am. Good, Rosa says. This city needed you. This cafe needed you. We needed you. You think about that. You think about how a month ago you were a stranger who didn't belong to this place. You think about how now you do belong. You think about how belonging happens slowly, quietly, almost without you noticing it's happening. You think about how it happens through repetition and small gestures and showing up again and again. Sophia comes to the cafe to meet you. She brings with her a package. I want to give you something, she says. She sits down and sets the package in front of you. Inside is a book, a Portuguese novel translated into English. On the title page, there's a note written in Sophia's handwriting. This is the book that helped me survive my years in Porto. This is the book I read when I was missing Lisbon, missing Marco, missing a version of my life that I thought I'd lost forever. I'm giving it to you because you deserve to know what kept me going. Read it. Let it change you the way stories change all of us. You open to the first page and you start reading. Within a few lines, you're hooked. Within a few paragraphs, you understand why this book mattered to Sophia. It's about longing. It's about distance. It's about loving something or someone that you can't have. It's about building a life anyway, in spite of the longing, in parallel to the longing, alongside the longing. This is beautiful, you say to Sophia. Thank you. Thank you, Sophia says, for everything, for not just passing by, for being brave enough to interfere, for caring about two people you'd never met. You leave the cafe that afternoon with the book in your bag. You go to your apartment. You make tea. You sit on your bed and you read. You read about a woman who loves a city she's left behind. You read about how that city lives in her, how it shapes every decision she makes, how it's a ghost that haunts her decisions in the best possible way. You're reading Sophia's story through the filter of someone else's words, through the filter of translation, through the filter of language that's been carefully chosen to preserve the original meaning while making it sound natural in a new tongue. You're reading about longing and you're thinking about how Marco and Sophia were longing for each other all those years, were carrying each other inside them, even though they were physically separate. That night, you go to dinner with Marco, Sophia, and Rosa. It's the four of you, the people who've become your community in Lisbon. You go to a restaurant that overlooks the river. You eat grilled sardines. You drink wine. You talk about books and translation and love and what it means to pay attention to people. I've been thinking about something, Marco says at one point. I've been thinking about how the letter found you instead of finding me. I've been thinking about how that's not an accident, how maybe the letter needed to find someone who would understand its importance, who would know what to do with it, who would see it as something that mattered. Maybe, you say. Or maybe I was just jet-lagged and curious. Maybe that's the same thing, Sophia says. Maybe paying attention is always a choice. Maybe being curious is always brave. You sit together as the evening deepens. You sit together as Lisbon spreads out below you, lights glittering, 1,000 stories happening simultaneously, 1,000 people carrying things, 1,000 people wondering if they're alone or if someone out there is thinking about them too. I'm going to write about this, you say suddenly, about all of it, about the letter and Marco and Sophia, and how you found each other. I'm going to write it down so it doesn't just exist as memory, so it exists as something real, something documented, something that other people can read. We'd like that, Marco says. We'd like to be remembered. You will be, you say. I promise you will be. This is the kind of story that deserves to be told. This is the kind of story that proves that love is real, that attention matters, that it's worth disrupting ordinary life for connection. Rosa squeezes your hand under the table. She doesn't say anything, but she doesn't have to. You understand that she's telling you that you're doing the right thing. You understand that she's telling you that stories matter. You understand that she's telling you to keep going. When you leave the restaurant that night, you're not the same person who arrived in Lisbon 6 weeks ago. You're someone who knows that paying attention to small things can change everything. You're someone who knows that love exists in the spaces between people, in the things unsaid, in the quiet moments that no one else is watching. You're someone who believes that connection matters, that words matter, that showing up for other people matters. You walk through Lisbon streets back to your apartment. You think about the mailbox, you think about the letter, you think about how that moment, the moment you decided to open something that wasn't meant for you, was the moment everything changed. Not just for Marco and Sophia, for you too, for all of you together. 2 months have passed. You're writing the story in the evenings. After you finish teaching, you're writing it slowly, carefully, trying to capture not just what happened, but what it felt like. You're trying to preserve the golden light of that cafe. You're trying to preserve the moment when Marco first read Sophia's letter. You're trying to preserve the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself, something that mattered. The language school has promoted you to head of curriculum. You have your own office, small, filled with books and papers and the accumulated mess of someone who cares about what they do. You have students who come to you and ask for advice about life, not just English. You have colleagues who've become friends. You have built a professional life in Lisbon. You have built a home. Marco's bookshop has expanded. He's taken on 2 employees. The second location in his and Sophia's apartment is becoming a gathering space. People come to read, to sit in quiet, to exist in a space where books and translation and art are valued. Sophia has taken on several translation projects. She's working with publishers to translate contemporary fiction into Portuguese. She's building a career in the city she thought she'd left forever. You go to dinner at their new apartment one evening. It's beautiful. Old wooden floors, high ceilings, walls lined with books. It looks like 2 people's lives colliding and creating something new. It looks like a place where love lives. Sophia has made a traditional Portuguese dinner. Marco has opened wine. You sit around their table, and you realize that this is what community looks like. This is what belonging looks like. This is what happens when people decide to take care of each other. I want to read what you've written, Sophia says during dinner. I want to see how you've captured us. I want to understand how our story looks from the outside. You've been hesitant to share your writing. It feels private, even though the story isn't yours. It feels like you're exposing something that should stay hidden. But Sophia is asking, and she has a right to know how she's being written. So you agree. You promise to let her read what you've written so far. The next evening, you bring her a printout of the sections you've completed. You hand it over nervously, like you're handing over something fragile. Sophia takes it and settles into a chair and begins to read. You leave her to it. You go into the other room where Marco is organizing books. You help him for a while. You don't ask Sophia what she thinks. You don't want to interrupt her. You want to let her read in peace. Let her see herself in your words. Let her have a moment with your interpretation of her story. When Sophia emerges from the other room, her eyes are red. She's been crying. Your heart sinks. You think you've made a mistake, written something wrong, captured something incorrectly. But then Sophia smiles and says, "It's beautiful. You've written it beautifully. You've understood. You've really understood." "I was afraid I'd gotten it wrong," you say. "I was afraid I'd missed something important." "The only thing you missed," Sophia says, "is how much we've already changed because of knowing you. You didn't just deliver a letter. You became part of our lives. You became part of this city for us. You became part of the reason we decided to build something together. Over the next week, you finish the story. You write the remaining sections. You write about everything that's happened in the 2 months since you found that letter. You write about how a simple act of attention can change multiple lives. You write about how Lisbon itself seems to be a character in the story, how the city enabled this story to happen, how the golden light in the narrow streets and the sense of history all contributed to making this possible. You write about Rosa. You write about how she was the keeper of the story before you arrived, how she knew Marco and Sophia's histories before either of them did, how she understood from the beginning that sometimes love needs a witness to make it real. You write about Marta, about how she represents a new generation of people in Lisbon who are quiet and thoughtful and pay attention to things. You write about the language school and your students and how teaching people to speak English is really about teaching them to express themselves, to make themselves understood, to connect across the gaps that language creates. You write about yourself. You write about how you came to Lisbon alone and broken and looking for something you couldn't name. You write about how finding someone else's love letter led you to find something in yourself, the capacity to care about strangers, the willingness to be brave, the understanding that connection is the most important thing we have. You write about how staying in Lisbon changed your trajectory. You write about how you're building a life here now, one that you couldn't have imagined when you first arrived. When you're done, you have something. You have a story that's maybe 13,000 words long. You have something that captures a moment, a city, a group of people, a transformation. You have something that feels true. even though parts of it are invented, even though parts of it are your interpretation, even though parts of it are filtered through your perspective. You print it out. You read it over one more time. You make notes in the margins. You make small corrections. You polish it as much as you can. And then you send it to Marco and Sophia and Rosa. You send them copies of the story you've written about their lives. Rosa calls you that evening. It's perfect, she says. You've captured it. You've captured all of it. The light, the feeling, the sense of this city holding us all in its hand. Sophia sends you a text. This is beautiful. This is your gift to us. This is how we'll remember this moment forever. Thank you. Marco doesn't text or call. Instead, he comes to the cafe the next morning and sits across from you and doesn't say anything for a long time. Then he says, "You've written about love, real love, not the fantasy version, but the real version, the messy, quiet, complicated version where people don't say things and spend years wondering and somehow love anyway. You've written about hope. You've written about Lisbon. You've written about us. And you've written about yourself, about how lonely you were, about how connection saved you. That took courage. You sit together in the golden light. You sit in the cafe where Sophia used to watch Marco order his coffee. You sit in the space where a love story happened without anyone knowing it was happening. You sit with someone you've become close to, someone whose story you've now become part of, someone whose life you've changed by paying attention. What happens now, you ask? With the story? What do we do with it? Whatever you want, Marco says. It's yours now. You've written it. You've transformed it into art. You can keep it private, or you can share it, or you can publish it. It's your gift to make. You think about that. You think about how stories are meant to be told. You think about how keeping this story quiet would be a waste. You think about how maybe there are other people out there who need to know that love can exist in silence, that attention matters, that paying attention to someone can change both of your lives. I think I want to share it, you say. I think other people should know about this. I think other people should know about Marco and Sophia and Lisbon and what happens when a stranger decides to be brave. Marco nods. He seems to expect this. He seems to understand that this is the natural conclusion, that this story was always meant to be told. 3 months have passed since you found the letter. You're sitting in your apartment in Lisbon, looking at the final version of your story. It's complete now. It's polished. It's ready to be released into the world. You've printed it out and bound it and created a cover. You've given copies to everyone who matters. Marco, Sophia, Rosa, Marta, your colleagues at the language school. The response has been unexpected. People are reading your story, and they're telling you that it changed them. They're telling you that they've started paying more attention to the people around them. They're telling you that they've understood through your words that love exists in the quiet moments. That connection is the most valuable thing we have. That being a witness to someone else's story is a sacred responsibility. Marta read the story and decided to apply for a graduate program in literature. She's going to study how love is represented in contemporary fiction. She says your story inspired her to pursue her passion for reading, for language, for the way that words can capture human experience. You've changed her trajectory without meaning to. You've influenced someone else's life just by paying attention to your own. Rosa has started a reading group at the cafe. She chooses books that explore love, connection, solitude, the spaces between people. She uses your story as a starting point for conversations about what it means to really see another person, what it means to love in silence, what it means to finally speak. The cafe has become a gathering space for people who think about these things, who care about these things, who want to be part of a community that values depth and attention and real connection. Marco and Sophia are happy. They're building a life together that honors both of their histories, the years they spent apart, the love they carried separately, the connection they're building now. They're not trying to make up for lost time. They're not trying to erase the past. They're accepting all of it. The longing, the separation, the letter, the reunion as part of their story. They're accepting you as part of their story. They're grateful every single day that you decided to care. You're teaching more classes now. You're writing in the evenings. You're sitting in the cafe in the mornings. You're building a life that feels solid, real, meaningful. You're building a life in Lisbon that you never thought was possible for you. You're building a home. One evening, as you're finishing the last edits of your story, you get an email from a literary magazine. Someone has sent them your work. Someone has recommended it. They want to publish it. They want to share your story about Marco and Sophia with thousands of people. They want to help you reach an audience. You read the email 3 times to make sure it's real. You read it a 4th time because you can't quite believe it. Your story, this small, personal, beautiful story about love and attention and a letter in the wrong mailbox, is going to be published. It's going to exist in a space beyond your circle of friends. It's going to reach people you'll never meet. You call Marco, you call Sophia, you call Rosa, you tell them the news. You hear them celebrate on the other end of the phone. You hear their joy at knowing that this story that changed all of your lives is going to change other lives too. You hear them understanding for the first time that what happened in Lisbon wasn't just for you. It was meant to be shared. It was meant to ripple out into the world. That night you walk through Lisbon. You walk through the neighborhoods you've gotten to know. You walk past the cafe where Sophia used to sit. You walk past Marco's bookshop. You walk past the building where Sophia and Marco now live together. You walk through the city that has become your home, and you think about how much has changed in 3 months. 3 months ago, you were a stranger. 3 months ago, you were alone. 3 months ago, you were looking for something and didn't know what it was. Now you're part of a community. Now you're connected to people who matter to you. Now you understand what you were looking for. It was connection. It was meaning. It was the knowledge that paying attention to other people's lives, caring about other people's stories matters. You think about the mailbox. You think about that moment when you decided to open something that wasn't meant for you. You think about how small that moment was, how quickly it could have gone differently, how you could have ignored the letter, how you could have walked away, how 1,000 tiny decisions could have prevented this entire story from happening. But you didn't walk away. You paid attention, you cared, you were brave. And because you were brave, a man and a woman who loved each other in silence finally got to speak. Because you were brave, a city full of beautiful stories got to hear one more story, one more truth about what it means to be human. Because you were brave, you found a home. You sit on a bench overlooking the Tagus River. You watch the water move past. You watch the city lights reflect on the water's surface. You watch Lisbon being Lisbon, beautiful, complicated, full of stories, full of people carrying love inside them, full of moments where everything changes but nothing looks different. You pull out your phone, you write a message to your students, pay attention to the people around you, notice things, care about things. You never know when a small moment of attention might change everything for you, for someone else, for the entire shape of the future. Love exists in the spaces between people. Love exists in the quiet moments. Love exists in the fact that we're all here, all trying, all hoping that someone is paying attention to us. Be the person who pays attention. Be the person who cares. Be the person who shows up. You send the message. You set down your phone. You sit in the darkness and you listen to Lisbon breathing around you. You listen to the water. You listen to the distant sounds of the city continuing its work of existing, of being, of holding all of us in its complicated, beautiful embrace. You think about tomorrow. You think about teaching your classes. You think about sitting in the cafe with Rosa. You think about seeing Marco and Sophia and the life they're building. You think about Marta and her future. You think about the story that's about to be published. You think about all the people who will read it and be changed by it and carry it with them. You think about gratitude. You think about how grateful you are for jet lag and curiosity and rental apartments with mailboxes. You think about how grateful you are for a city that welcomes strangers and turns them into community. You think about how grateful you are for the courage you didn't know you had until you needed it. And then you get up. You walk back toward your apartment. You walk through streets you've learned to love. You walk past the cafe where this all started. You walk past the bookshop. You walk past the lives you've become part of. And you know that tomorrow you'll wake up and you'll do it all again. You'll pay attention, you'll care, you'll show up for the people and the places and the stories that matter to you. Because that's what you learned in Lisbon. That's what the letter taught you. That's what Marco and Sophia and Rosa and Marta all showed you. That the most important thing you can do is pay attention. The most important thing you can do is care. The most important thing you can do is show up and be present and let yourself be changed by the people around you. That's how you build a life. That's how you build a home. That's how you learn to love. By paying attention, by caring, by being brave enough to say yes to a story that wasn't yours but somehow became yours anyway. So here's where we leave you, drifting now into the space between waking and sleeping, between your life and theirs, between Lisbon and wherever you are right now, listening to these words as they fade into silence. The story is complete. The letter has been delivered. The connection has been made. And you're still here in this moment, in this cafe, in this city that holds all of us. You're still paying attention. You're still caring. You're still showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when you're not sure it matters. But it does matter. Every small attention matters. Every moment of noticing another person matters. Every decision to care instead of walking away matters. The letter in the mailbox mattered. Marco mattered. Sophia mattered. Rosa and Marta and you, all of it mattered. Lisbon is sleeping now, or almost sleeping. The lights are dimming, the restaurants are closing, the people are heading home. The city is settling into night, into rest, into the quiet hours when nothing changes but everything is different, and you're settling too. You're letting go of the story now. You're letting it drift away like a dream you're trying to hold on to as you wake up. The words are fading. The golden light is fading. The cafe is fading. But what remains, what always remains, is the knowing. The knowing that you were brave. The knowing that you cared. The knowing that paying attention to someone else's story changed your own story. Let that be enough. Let the attention be enough. Let the caring be enough. Let yourself be enough. The city is quiet now. Your breathing is slowing. The weight of your body is becoming heavier, sinking into wherever you are, whatever you're resting on. Your eyes are closing, or maybe they're already closed. Maybe you're already drifting, already floating in that space between here and sleep, between waking and dreaming. And that's okay. That's exactly right. That's where you're supposed to be. Sleep well. Dream of Lisbon. Dream of golden light and love letters and strangers who become friends. Dream of the knowing that someone out there is paying attention to you, is thinking about you, is glad that you're in the world. Sweet dreams.